My name is Emily, and I am 35 years old. I'm sorry, but your kids just wouldn't know how to handle themselves in the wilderness, my sister-in-law, Sophia, declared, her voice dripping with fake concern during our weekly family dinner. This camping trip is for experienced outdoor people only. I watched as my children, Linda, 10, and Elvin, 8, slumped in their chairs, their faces falling at yet another exclusion from family activities. My husband, Peter, was away on a business trip, leaving me to face his sister's constant undermining alone. My kids have been taking wilderness survival classes for the past year, I said calmly, cutting into my chicken. They're actually quite capable outdoors. Sophia laughed, that high-pitched sound that always set my teeth on edge. Oh, honey, a few classes don't make up for being city kids. We're talking about real camping here, no bathrooms, no electricity, just pure nature at Silver Pine Campground. I nearly choked on my water. Silver Pine Campground? Of all the places they could have chosen? Besides, Sophia continued, we've already planned everything. It's going to be me, Robert, our kids, Mom and Dad, and Cousin Sarah's family, the perfect outdoor adventure. Perfect indeed. I thought about the property deed sitting in my home office safe, the one my grandfather had left me 5 years ago. Silver Pine Campground had been his pride and joy, a sprawling 200-acre wilderness retreat that he built from nothing. When he passed, he left it to me, his only grandchild, who shared his passion for conservation. Nobody in the family knew. Grandpa had made sure of that, knowing how they would try to take advantage. I had kept the ownership quiet, letting the management company handle the day-to-day operations while I made improvements behind the scenes. Well, if you're sure we can't join, I trailed off, watching Sophia's satisfied smile grow wider. It's really for the best, she said, patting my hand condescendingly. We wouldn't want our kids to feel out of place, or worse, get hurt because they don't know what they're doing. Later that night, as I tucked Linda and Elvin into bed, I could see the hurt in their eyes. Mom, Linda whispered, we're not really city kids, are we? We know about camping. Remember all the stuff great-grandpa taught us. I smiled, remembering the weekends we had spent with Grandpa at Silver Pine, learning about local plants, tracking animals, and understanding weather patterns. My kids probably knew more about outdoor survival than Sophia's phone-addicted teenagers. No, sweetie, you're not just city kids, I assured her. And I think it's time we showed the family exactly what you can do. The next morning, I made 2 calls. First, to the campground manager, Bob, who had worked with my grandfather for 20 years. They're planning to camp next weekend, I told him. Let them make the reservation, but I have some special instructions. Then I called my friend Lisa, who ran a local wilderness school where my kids took classes. Remember that camping skills competition you mentioned? I think it's time we hosted it at Silver Pine. As the week progressed, Sophia's social media filled with posts about their upcoming exclusive family camping adventure. She made sure to tag everyone who was invited, probably so I wouldn't miss who was included. The day before their trip, she called me. Just checking if you're not too upset about missing the camping trip, she said, that false sweetness back in her voice. We could try to include you guys in the next family event. Maybe something more your speed, like a movie night. Don't worry about us, I replied. We've made our own plans for the weekend. I hope you all have a great time at Silver Pine. Oh, we will, she laughed. Robert's already packed all the luxury camping gear. It's going to be Instagram-worthy. Little did she know, Silver Pine had strict rules about authentic wilderness camping. No luxury RVs, no generators, no cell phone towers nearby. Just pure nature, exactly as Grandpa had intended. I'm sure it will be memorable, I said, ending the call before I could give anything away. That evening, I gathered Linda and Elvin in the living room. How would you two like to show off your outdoor skills this weekend? Their eyes lit up as I explained the plan. The wilderness school competition would bring together kids from all over the state to demonstrate their survival skills. It would be held right next to the family campsite, though far enough away not to disturb them. Unless, of course, they decided to investigate the commotion. Can we show Aunt Sophia our fire-starting technique? Elvin asked excitedly. The one great-grandpa taught us. And what about our shelter building? Linda added. We've been practicing. I hugged them both, feeling proud of their enthusiasm despite all the times they'd been excluded and underestimated. You can show them everything you've learned. But remember, we're not doing this to prove anything to them. We're doing it because we love the outdoors. Just like great-grandpa did. As I tucked them in that night, I looked at the photo on their wall. My grandfather standing at the entrance to Silver Pine Campground, his arms around a younger Linda and Elvin. He would have loved to see what was about to unfold. Tomorrow, Sophia would learn that her city kid cousins weren't quite what she thought. And maybe, just maybe, she'd learn something about judging people based on her own narrow assumptions. I pulled out the property deed one last time, running my fingers over my grandfather's signature. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered. Sometimes, the best lessons are learned outdoors. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect camping weather. I watched from my office window as a line of cars pulled into Silver Pine Campground, recognizing Sophia's luxury SUV leading the convoy. Bob had texted me earlier, confirming their arrival. Ma'am, he messaged, your sister-in-law just threw quite a fit about the no RV policy. Said something about being promised premium spots with hookups. I smiled to myself. Let the adventure begin. I smiled, imagining Sophia's face when she realized her glamping plans weren't going to work out. Just follow standard procedure, Bob. No exceptions. Meanwhile, Linda and Elvin were helping Lisa and the other instructors set up the wilderness competition course. We had arrived at dawn through the private access road, staying out of sight from the main camping areas. The kids could barely contain their excitement. Mom, Linda called out, waving from where she was preparing the fire-starting station. We can't hear Aunt Sophia from here. She's really loud. Indeed, Sophia's voice carried across the morning air. What do you mean we can't use generators? How am I supposed to charge my phone? This is ridiculous. I walked over to where Lisa was organizing the participants. 20 kids from various wilderness schools had shown up, all eager to demonstrate their skills. Linda and Elvin fit right in, already chatting with their fellow competitors about different knot-tying techniques. Your kids are natural leaders, Lisa commented, watching them help younger participants practice. Just like their great-grandfather. He would have loved this. Around mid-morning, we heard the first sounds of the family settling into their campsite. Through the trees, I could see them struggling with their tents, obviously unused to actual camping. Sophia's teenagers sat on their phones, trying to find non-existent signals, while her husband, Robert, attempted to start a fire with lighter fluid. Strictly against campground rules, Bob called out, confiscating the lighter fluid. Fire hazard. You'll have to do it the traditional way. This is impossible. Sophia's voice rang out. How do people live like this? That's when we started the competition. The sound of drums, traditional wilderness school signals, echoed through the trees. I saw heads turning at the family campsite. Curiosity piqued. Welcome to the first annual Silver Pine Wilderness Challenge, Lisa announced through a battery-powered megaphone. Competitors will demonstrate essential outdoor survival skills in honor of the campground's founder. I watched as my children lined up with the other participants. They looked confident, prepared, and absolutely in their element. Linda had her hair braided back practically, wearing the hiking boots Grandpa had given her for her last birthday. Elvin stood tall in his wilderness school vest, covered in well-earned merit badges. The first challenge was shelter building. Teams have 30 minutes to construct a weather-resistant shelter using only natural materials, Lisa explained. I noticed movement at the family campsite. People were wandering over to watch. Mom, Sarah's youngest, whispered loudly, those kids are building better tents than ours. Linda and Elvin worked seamlessly with their team, using techniques they had perfected through countless practice sessions. Their shelter took shape quickly, sturdy, well-designed, and completely weatherproof. Is that Linda and Elvin? I heard my mother-in-law's surprised voice. What are they doing here? The next challenge was fire starting, using traditional methods only. Elvin stepped up confidently, demonstrating the bow drill technique Grandpa had taught him. Within minutes, he had a small flame going, nurturing it carefully into a proper campfire. But they're city kids. Sophia's voice carried across the clearing. How do they know how to do this? I finally turned to acknowledge the growing crowd from our family campsite. They're not just city kids, I said calmly. They're their great-grandfather's grandchildren. And they've been learning from the best. What do you mean? Sophia demanded, her face flushed with either embarrassment or anger, possibly both. Before I could answer, Bob approached with his clipboard. Ma'am, he said to Sophia, I need to speak with the property owner about your multiple violations of campground rules. Do you know where I can find her? All eyes turned to me as I raised my hand. That would be me. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia's mouth opened and closed several times, no words coming out. My mother-in-law grabbed her husband's arm for support. Even the teenagers finally looked up from their phones. You own Silver Pine? Sophia finally managed to sputter. Grandpa left it to me 5 years ago, I explained, pulling out a copy of the deed I had brought along just in case. He knew how much the kids and I loved it here, how much we respected the land and understood true camping. But why didn't you say anything when I was planning this trip? Sophia's voice had lost its usual condescending tone. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. Or would you have assumed I was lying, just like you assumed my kids couldn't handle the outdoors? In the background, Linda and Elvin's team was being awarded first place for the shelter building competition. My children beamed with pride, their accomplishments speaking louder than any argument I could make. I think, my father-in-law said slowly, we all owe you and the kids an apology. Sophia looked like she had swallowed something sour, but nodded reluctantly. We shouldn't have excluded you, she admitted, or made assumptions about the kids. I watched as my children accepted their awards, standing tall and confident in front of everyone. They had proven themselves not because they needed to, but because they loved what they were doing, just like Grandpa had always taught them. The competition continues tomorrow. I turned to the family. You're welcome to watch, I said, then added with a small smile, and maybe the kids could teach you a thing or two about real camping. As the family walked back to their campsite, looking significantly humbled, I heard Elvin call out, Hey, Aunt Sophia, want us to show you how to start a fire without lighter fluid? Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about rising above and showing your true worth. Grandpa had known that all along. The rest of the weekend unfolded in ways I never expected. By Saturday evening, our once-divided family had transformed into something entirely different. Linda and Elvin, initially excluded for being city kids, were now the campsite celebrities. Like this, Aunt Sophia, Linda demonstrated patiently, showing her aunt how to identify edible berries during the foraging competition. Great-grandpa taught us that these darker ones are sweeter. Sophia, her designer camping outfit now legitimately dirty, actually listened. The condescension had faded from her voice, replaced by genuine interest. Your grandfather really taught you all this? She asked. Mom made sure we kept learning after he passed away, Linda explained, carefully placing berries in her competition basket. We come here almost every weekend to practice. Meanwhile, Elvin had drawn a crowd of his cousins, demonstrating how to read weather patterns from cloud formations. Even Sophia's teenagers had put down their phones, fascinated by their younger cousin's knowledge. That's why we never need weather apps out here, Elvin explained proudly. Nature tells you everything you need to know if you pay attention. I watched from a distance, letting my children have their moment. Bob appeared beside me, clipboard in hand. Just like your grandfather, he said quietly. He'd be proud, seeing them teach others, not to show off, but because they love it. He was right. This weekend had become about more than just proving Sophia wrong. It was about honoring Grandpa's legacy, his belief that nature could bring people together and teach them what really mattered. That evening, as both families gathered around a properly built campfire, thanks to Elvin's instruction, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The barriers of city kids versus outdoor people had dissolved. I think we've learned something important this weekend, my father-in-law said, looking around the circle, and not just about camping. Sophia, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I owe all of you an apology, she admitted, looking at my children and then at me. I've been difficult. Not just about this camping trip, but about a lot of things. My kids, showing wisdom beyond their years, simply nodded. They had already moved past the hurt, focused instead on sharing their knowledge and passion for the outdoors. Maybe, Sophia continued hesitantly, we could make this a regular thing, with all of us. The kids could teach us more, and we could actually learn to do this properly. I thought about Grandpa, about how he always said Silver Pine was meant to bring families together. I think that could be arranged, I replied with a smile. As the stars came out, we sat around the fire, telling stories about Grandpa. I shared memories of him teaching me about the land, and for the first time, the family listened without judgment or interruption. That's why he left you the campground, my mother-in-law realized. You understood what it meant to him. The next morning, as the families packed up to leave, there was none of the usual rush to escape back to civilization. Instead, people took their time, appreciating the morning birdsong and crisp air. Sophia approached me as I supervised the competition cleanup. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for this weekend, but for showing me what I've been missing by being so judgmental. I nodded, accepting her words for what they were, a beginning. That evening, Peter called after everyone had left. Sophia called me, he said, sounding amazed. She actually apologized. What exactly happened out there? I looked at Linda and Elvin, curled up on the couch, reading their wilderness guides, already planning for the next competition. Let's just say your sister finally learned to see beyond her own assumptions. And the campground, he asked. Why didn't you ever tell me? Some things, I thought, need to be shown, not told. As I hung up, I walked to my office and looked at the property deed again. But this time, I didn't see it as proof of ownership or a tool for revenge. Instead, I saw it as Grandpa had intended, a way to bring family together, to teach important lessons, and to preserve something precious for future generations. Linda and Elvin had already started planning activities for the next family camping weekend. Their cousins had been texting them nonstop, eager to learn more wilderness skills. Even Sophia had signed up for some basic outdoor training courses. Sometimes, the best victories aren't about proving others wrong, but about helping them see what's right. Grandpa had known that all along. And now, thanks to a weekend of real camping, so did everyone else. The wilderness competition became a monthly event at Silver Pine, with our family among its most enthusiastic participants. And every time I saw Sophia struggling to start a fire the proper way, or helping her teenagers identify edible plants, I smiled, knowing that some of life's best lessons really do happen outdoors.